Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk. I'm Tracy Morgan. Thanks again for joining us today. Today is our day with Specialized Staffing. And of course, we always love to talk to Lisa Gard, of course, owner of Specialized Staffing right here in Butler. Hi, Lisa. How are you doing today?
Hey, Tracy. Doing well. How about yourself?
Good. Interesting topic you have for us today.
How to quit a job.
How do we leave it?
Well, and it's pretty funny because if you go online, I always look online before I come on the show and, kind of gather some research to make sure I'm, passing along accurate information. And boy, if you look up how not to quit your job, what a collection of interesting videos and and documentation about what not to do.
And you wonder how many people have actually gone through with the what not to do scenarios.
A lot. And it's funny because there was one, just because it was interesting, there was one that was kind of cute. I believe it was in Europe. And the individual was quitting their job, and they had left to start their own bakery. So they quit via cake. So they baked a cake, and it was actually very nice and professionally written letter of recommendation or a letter of resignation, but it was written on a big sheet cake, and it said, "Dear so and so, thank you for the opportunity to work here, and I've given some thought to my life, and I want to pursue my dream, and that is to own a bakery. So as of this date, I will no longer work here, and I'm tendering my resignation." And at the end, it says, "If you enjoy this cake, please call me for your your baking needs." So I thought that was kind of cute and clever, and certainly not anything I would recommend.
It's a lot of piping.
It is a lot of
amazing piping. I'm thinking, wow, that's a big paragraph.
But it was very cute. But I'm not here to talk about those ways not to resign.
Yeah.
And really want to focus on helping people to quit their jobs in a way that will be helpful to them in the future. Because as unhappy as you may be, and as let's face it, ticked off as you might be at somebody or a circumstance or something, it doesn't pay to burn any bridges.
So you basically answer my first question is, are there right ways or there wrong ways?
Mm-hmm.
So, I would have to say there are wrong ways out there.
There are right and wrong answers to this one.
Exactly. There will be a test later. So what's the first thing that we should do when we're thinking about this is what I need to do?
Mm-hmm, sure. And a lot of people would say, well, the first thing you need to do is, write a letter of why do I keep saying that, recommendation of resignation. But quite frankly, there are some mistakes I've seen people make prior to that. And so I would say the first thing you need to do before you resign is, A, make sure you have another job to go to. I see too many people unhappy in a situation leave and then have to explain that gap on their resume or explain to a potential employer why they're not working. And, the answer is, I was unhappy there, so I quit. Okay, fine. But was that the most logical decision for you to make based on your finances? And if you that's a clear indicator that you might be irrational in your thinking.
So there are times where it's legitimate to quit. I guess I'm thinking, like, let's say you have a family member who needs care and you're the caretaker.
Oh, sure.
So, I mean, but that's an explainable.
If you're quitting because of personal reasons and you need to take care of somebody, that's fine. You quit for that reason. But if you're leaving because you're unhappy and you're looking for another job, make sure you have that other job before you resign.
Okay.
If you're resigning to move somewhere or because, your husband was transferred or you're going to take care of a child or a parent, that's fine. But as we move further down, you'll see there are correct ways to do that as well.
So let's get into who I should tell. I mean, now this is assuming that I have another job. This is assuming that I'm ready to quit, right?
Absolutely. And two, if you do have another job, another mistake I've seen people make is not having that offer firmed up. So there's a verbal, we're interested, would like you to start. They go ahead, they give their notice, and then they get a call, well, we didn't get approval, or, something has changed and we're no longer going to be able to offer you the job. Make sure that the offer is a sealed deal. Make sure you have an offer letter. Make sure you have a firm start date. Make sure you know what you're going to be making. and what your benefit package is, if there is one. Make sure you have all of those things in writing before you tender your resignation, if you're quitting for another job.
Now, is there ever those positions out there where a company would not let you go? If you turn in your resignation and they say no?
Yeah, actually, I have heard of that. It's called a counteroffer, and actually, we do want to talk about that. So when you're going to resign and you have all your ducks in a row, you've got your other deal worked out, you want to make sure that, A, you do it in person, if you can. You want to sit down with your boss first. You want to tell your boss first. You don't want to tell all your coworkers first. You know, your boss does have a position for a reason, and you should show the respect and sit down with your boss. You should have your resignation in writing, and it should explain that you're leaving. It doesn't have to go into too much detail why. It just needs to, say that you're leaving and when your last day will be.
Now, I want to back up because I know we started talking about who we should tell first, and you say your boss. If you have a chain of command, because I know I've been in positions where you have your immediate supervisor, and then the supervisor over him, and then the supervisor over him or her. And,
sure.
So how far up do you start?
You start with your immediate supervisor.
Okay.
Tell your immediate supervisor. If whoever you report to, that's who you want to tell.
Okay.
Okay. And I say you want to do that in person, but if your supervisor, say, is off-site, if you work somewhere where you have a regional manager and they're only in a few, days, a month or whatever, you may need to make a phone call. Ask them if they have time to talk. If not, when do you have time to talk? Explain to them then that you're leaving when your last day is, and let them know that you'll follow up with a resignation letter. And then you can certainly email that to them as an attachment. But I don't recommend resigning via email, via text message, instant message, or cake.
No matter how good the cake is. I wonder if those people actually ate the cake.
I'm sure they did. It did look like there wasn't animosity.
Sure.
I saw some other cakes that weren't quite so, I would not eat those cakes.
Gentle.
Yeah.
In their verbiage.
Yes.
Well, okay, so you say, it's okay to quit via phone. Not email.
If your boss is located somewhere else, call him on the phone and schedule a time when you can talk. If he or she says, let's talk now, that's fine. But then follow up in writing. But what I'm saying is don't just fire off an email saying, hey, I quit.
Well, then walk us through a scenario where, let's say, I want to still be kind to the company because they've been kind to me. It's just my time to move on. I now have a new job to go to. Okay?
Right.
So I'm sitting there with my boss. I'm trying to explain this, and I want to be kind to say, I can still work like 2 months until, you get somebody in here and I can move on if that's the situation.
Sure.
And then they turn around and they escort you out the door. I mean, do you have to be prepared for that kind of thing, or
you do? You want to be prepared for anything. So you always want to give a notice, and protocol is 2 weeks. So you give a 2 weeks notice, and your boss may very well say it's our policy not to, once somebody resigns, not to have them work out their notice so you can get your things and we'll escort you out. That's the policy in some companies. And even if you know that to be the policy, you still want to give a 2 week notice.
But why is that important, 2 weeks? Or even just giving a notice?
It's important because it shows respect. And it's important if you want to use somebody in that organization as a reference.
That's true, because that would, in a sense, burn your bridge.
Absolutely.
So
you still want to offer the notice, even if you know they're not going to make you work that notice out. So we have candidates all the time who are, because a lot of our candidates are currently working and they're looking for better opportunities. So they're resigning a position to accept the opportunities with our clients. And we help a candidate with that. They have to go back and they have to resign. So we help them do that in a way that's going to be productive for them in the future, because nothing's permanent. So the opportunity that they're currently taking, if in the future they decide to move forward, there are references that they're going to need.
And I'm glad you said that it's about respect. How often do you hear people not verbalize that to a potential new employer or the employer that they're leaving? Because I tried that once in the way of somebody was pressuring me to get in earlier than I wanted to. And I basically said, if I want to respect them and leaving at a certain time, I want to respect you the same way. And throwing out that word respect, they accepted that answer a lot easier than I thought it was going to go.
Our clients will accept that answer too. If they really want to get a candidate started prior to 2 weeks, we do let them know that it's a matter of we wouldn't advise an employee of yours to quit with a short notice or a no notice. So please understand this person. And we do that up front. This person is currently working, will need to give a 2 weeks notice. So we always advise 2 weeks because that's etiquette.
And it's kind of nice to work with specialized staffing for many reasons, but for that one in particular, as we're talking about quitting the job, because you're kind of that go-between, wouldn't you say? I mean, you're a part of the process of getting a new job.
We are a part of the process in that we'll advise you. And it's tough to quit a job. It's a tough decision to leave one job and go to another. So we do help people through that process and help people understand why it's important to get a notice and some of those things that you should be doing while you're working your 2 week notice.
I was just going to ask you that. Okay, so we've sat down with the boss. We've said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So now what?
Sure. Well, you want to make sure that you're gathering references from that company before you leave. So obviously your supervisor, ask your supervisor if they would provide a reference for you. If you've had a good working relationship, they should be able to say yes. It's interesting because when we reach out and talk to the references of our candidates before we would send a resume to a client, and when we reach out to those references, it's funny. When a reference has good things to say, they'll say them. They'll tell us this person was a rock star, they were great, they were very dependable, they did a great job. If they don't have anything nice to say, they'll fall back on, it's our policy not to give any information. You have to call human resources.
A standard line.
Standard line. But we typically hear good things from people who have good things to say. So I think that goes back to our parents always taught us, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And that's a great fallback. HR departments and legal departments will advise their supervisors, don't give references. But if they really liked you and you did a good job for them, they'll do it. They'll talk about you.
I know we're focusing, and we're talking with Lisa Gard today with Specialized Staffing, and we're focusing on how to quit your job, the appropriate way to do that. But I'm going to ask you this. If we're seeking another job and you're talking about references, do we use our current employer when our current employer doesn't really realize that we're looking for another job?
Only if you want to risk losing your current job.
Okay.
So no, we always tell our candidates we don't recommend giving references from your current company if they don't know you're looking and you don't want them to know you're looking. We'll certainly call them if you want us to. And there are people who will come and talk to us and say, my employer does know I'm looking. Sometimes it's a matter of they know there's going to be an end. The company was acquired and there are duplicate positions, and I know mine is going to be over at the end of the year. So there are times when you can call a current employer. But typically, if you're conducting a job search without your employer's knowledge, you wouldn't want to use a reference there. Some people do use colleagues as references from places that they're currently working, and I guess that's okay as long as you're aware that if a call happens to put into motion a chain of events that
Could go
ultimately
to the wrong
end
person.
your employment.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't recommend it. And that's why I say when you're leaving a job, make sure you're gathering the names and contact information of those people who will give you references, because you don't want to have to use your current employer moving forward. So you reach back to the employer you were with before then and you give a supervisory reference. Another thing is, if you're in a management role, it's perfectly appropriate to get a subordinate reference. If I'm considering you for a management role with one of my clients, I would love to talk to somebody that reported to you and ask them what type of a manager you were, what they liked about reporting to you, what were the types of things that you helped them with, because it gives me good insight into what kind of a manager you were. So it's okay to get a subordinate reference. It's okay to get a peer reference. This is a coworker. As long as it's a professional coworker. We really don't want your friends, because there's just not a lot of weight there. We want somebody who can speak to your performance, what your responsibilities were, how you performed in those responsibilities, what your strengths were. So it's important to gather those references upon leaving. And then keep in touch with those people.
And how do you explain that as a potential employer or employee, I should say, to a potential new employer that you don't have your current boss on the reference list? I mean, what are the magic words that you say to them?
Mm-hmm. No, you just be honest. I'm
okay.
currently working and I don't want to jeopardize my current opportunity, my current career. So I'm not providing you with the supervisor at my current company. However, here's the supervisor of my previous company. And if you extend an offer to me and I accept, you can call my current supervisor.
Talk about the exit interview for just a moment. And again, we're talking about how to quit your job with Lisa Gard with Specialized Staffing. And I'm interested in what you have to say about this because honestly, in this industry, there's just so much turnover that it's just very common. One day you're here, one day you're not. Mm-hmm. And so I've only in my career had one exit interview. And it was very odd to me because I'm thinking this never happens, So what's an exit interview all about? Why do you have them?
Mm-hmm. Well, it happens more often than you think. And companies have exit interviews to identify reasons. I don't want to say reasons why people leave, to identify ways they can improve their retention, ways they can improve the experience employees have there. So if you're leaving, you've made the decision to leave. And it's unfortunate. We've invested time and money and, into your training. And unfortunately, it didn't work out long term. So you're leaving. But before you leave, we'd like to know why. What was it that prompted you to leave? What could we have done differently? A lot of times you'll find they're asking you, do you feel you received appropriate training? Do you feel you were compensated fairly? What were your, biggest challenges here? What did you find rewarding here? Because companies want to improve moving forward. So typically those exit interviews are, you should actually take that as a compliment that they want to know your thoughts before you leave.
So it wouldn't be the time to vent all your frustrations. It's more of a constructive, I guess constructive criticism would be the best phrase.
Absolutely, because obviously you left because you were unhappy, and they know that. So they're not expecting you to, to give them a report that's all rainbows and unicorns, but they know that. But they do want to know what they're trying to do is identify ways they can improve.
So talk about a counter offer. If I think I'm already going, if I'm already out the door,
sure,
and I'm not expecting a counter offer,
right?
What happens in that moment if a company says, well, how about we up the ante?
Yeah, oftentimes when you resign, your manager will say, I'm sorry to hear that. What can we do to keep you? And honestly, you want to be aware of that. It's counteroffers, there are statistics, and I've seen anywhere between 50 and 70% of counteroffers that are accepted don't work past 6 months. So what I'm saying is, and these are statistics, you can look this up online, that if you accept a counteroffer, chances are within the next 6 months, you're going to leave anyway, whether that's on your own or whether that's involuntary. But there are a few things to consider when accepting a counteroffer. So you've already let your boss know that you were compelled to leave. Whether you were actually looking or you were approached, you were compelled to leave for a reason. Oftentimes, it really isn't about the money. And the counteroffer oftentimes is about the money. So if you're looking to leave a position, most often we find people are looking to leave because they want to advance in their career. They want to broaden, the scope of their responsibilities. They want to do something different. They are lacking a sense of purpose in the organization, things that they really can't change for you short term. So a lot of times, what will it take to keep you ends up in a raise. So we hear this from candidates. Well, I resigned, but my boss came to me and said they would give me more money than the offer is for, so I'm going to stay. But the reason we talked in the first place was that you were looking for opportunities to advance in your career, and you said that there were no opportunities with this company. Has that changed? Well, no. There is nowhere for me to go, but they just gave me $2 an hour to stay, so I'm going to stay. What's going to happen there oftentimes is a few months is going to go by and you're going to realize, I'm making more money, but I'm still not happy. So a lot of times it isn't really about the money. And counteroffers, so then another thing to consider is with a counteroffer, your boss now knows you were looking or that you, so there's a little bit of a trust issue there now because your boss knows if you're unhappy, you're out the door. So you have to consider if there's a change in business climate and there's a downsizing, who are they going to look at first? Are they going to look at the loyal employee or are they going to look at the person who quit and now they had to give them more money to stay? So there are things to look at there too. Counteroffers are really tricky and you really have to think before you accept a counteroffer.
Are they positive at any time? Are there more negatives that outweigh the positives?
Well, when you consider that 50 to 70% of them end within the next 6 months, that tells me that a majority of them don't work out. Do some of them work out? Yes, those statistics would certainly point to that 30 to 50% of them do work out. But it depends on the reason. Now, I have known a candidate who turned around and the counteroffer was a true promotion and added responsibility that satisfied her need to move ahead in her career, but that was because there was an opening.
Just so happened
there was an opening. So that did work out long term. So there are success stories, but I advise my candidates to think long and hard before they accept a counteroffer because a lot of times I see that the counteroffer is about the money, but the initial motivation for looking to leave was not about the money.
So do people ever play the game then, one company against the other?
Mm-hmm.
Does that work?
No.
Okay.
All right. It really doesn't. Long term, same thing. You end up with the counteroffer. Now, if you're playing a game, the new employer gets a sense that you're playing a game. When you go to a new employer and say, well, I resigned, but they offered me more money, so unless you give me more money, I'm going to stay at my current employer. You have now just set the precedence that you just can't be trusted in terms of loyalty.
Yeah.
So
that's a negative.
It is a negative. You're starting off on a very negative foot with your new employer if you back them into a corner before you even start. Sorry. I know, some people may not like to hear that, but it's true.
So talk about once we leave, are we obligated to stay in touch with our old coworkers? Should we? And sometimes I find it to be hard because at old jobs that I used to work with, people are just now in different places.
Sure.
You're not a part of that climate anymore.
It's important to stay in touch with those people that you want to be connected with moving forward, and specifically your references. So you do want to keep track of them. We have, if you've left on good terms, there's no reason why people that you were colleagues with aren't your friends. You still get together with them at lunchtime or whatever. So there is no reason not to keep in touch. There are several reasons to keep in touch. It all just depends on your personal preference there. But one thing I did want to add about while you still are employed is that you should be doing your best. A lot of times people resign and they think, okay, so I'm done here. I'm just kind of biding my time and doing the bare minimum, going to skate through the next 2 weeks. And it's really important when you resign in that 2-week period that you're wrapping things up as best you can, that you're talking with your boss about what's still undone, what needs to be given to somebody else, any recommendations you can make for how those tasks and responsibilities and projects can be dispersed. That's another thing that you really should be doing in the last 2 weeks there. Because, again, if you're going to use this person as a reference, that will be something they talk about. This person quit, and when they quit, they made sure everything was covered. That speaks very highly for you and your work ethic and your loyalty. So that's also something that's very highly recommended.
Loyalty. It's an interesting word that you use that because it seems like years ago we all were in the same job for 30 years and,
Mm-hmm.
You retired from that job. Now it seems like everybody keeps jumping around. But I don't know if that's loyalty on the company side or loyalty on the employer side or employee side. What do you see? Is that a trend that it's just a matter of we're just...
Well, and I think loyalty, maybe dedication was a better word to use. You're showing dedication to your job and doing a good job by making sure that you do that before you leave. Now, getting back to loyalty, though, because you wouldn't be leaving if you were loyal to the company. However, I want to say, don't hold me to this, but the most recent statistic I saw was that the average tenure in a position, no, it wasn't the average tenure. I'm sorry. I want to say that the average person, the average young person who's entering the workforce now will have 7 jobs in their lifetime. That's the statistic I was trying to pull out of my head. But yeah, 7.
Whole different world than what we used to live in.
You used to
years
start
ago.
right out of high school and retire from the same company, get your watch, and be done with it. But times are changing.
What else would you like to talk about today in our last couple of minutes together when we're talking, again, Lisa Gard with Specialized Staffing, focusing on how to quit your job and do it actually in the appropriate way?
Just to kind of recap that, make sure you do it in person and follow up with that in writing. Give your 2-week notice. Give your best while you're still there for 2 weeks. During that 2-week period or 1-week period that you're still there, make sure that you're gathering people that you can use as references, making sure you have their contact information, and just that you're leaving on good terms. And, just as a note, if there were coworkers or managers who rubbed you the wrong way while you were there, as tempting as it is to give them that peace of mind that you've always wanted to, don't do it. It's not worth it. Just leave on good terms. Don't burn any bridges. Keep in touch, because that experience, what goes around comes around. So if you're positive and you leave on a positive note, you can certainly take that with you, and it will benefit you moving forward.
How do we get a hold of Specialized Staffing, of course, right there on Main Street?
Sure. You can call us at 724-287-8380. Our recruiters will work with you in identifying the types of opportunities that you are best suited for and that you want to hear about. And then, again, when it comes time that you find that opportunity and you're having to quit your job, we'll walk you through that process as well. Make sure you're doing things right in a way that is going to be beneficial to you moving forward. And, we'll help you through that whole transition until you start.
And again, what industries do you primarily work with?
We work with a lot of manufacturing companies in the fields of accounting, finance, human resources, purchasing, also production management and engineering. But we also work with a lot of service industries in the administrative type functions, accounting, finance, HR, administration.
So even if you're not in one of those industries and you want to change jobs, you can still work with Specialized Staffing because you work with people transitioning in industries, don't you?
Sure. To some point, a lot of our clients are looking for people with very specific industry experience. So actually, I'm glad you asked me about that. If somebody is looking to switch careers, switch industries, they need to be very realistic in that they may be starting over in terms of the level of position they hold. And if there's a realism there, we can work with somebody. But for the most part, our clients typically do require some specific experience.
Very good. Okay, one more time with that phone number.
724-287-8380 and the website, specializedstaffinginc.com.
Lisa Gard with Specialized Staffing. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tracy.
And folks, thanks again for joining us for this segment of Let's Talk. I'm Tracy Morgan.